Yes, welcome to our YouTube channel. This is George and WHITNEY'S tutorial. So now today we are going to look at complex numbers. So when we talk about complex numbers, a complex number is a number that has two parts. We have the real part and the imaginary part. So a complex number may be represented by a number of letters, usually W, Z, and others. So, but most commonly is Z. So we are going to be representing our complex number with letter Z. So now, as we've said that a complex number has two parts, that is the real part and the imaginary part. So it is represented like, so our Z is going to be equal to, so the real part plus the imaginary part. Are you seeing that? So we shall see that our Z will equal to, the real part is the one that is on the x-axis, then the imaginary part is the one on the on the y-axis. So it will be x plus I y. So it is I y, or sometimes they write j. It can be z is equal to x plus I y. So sometimes they write j. So where x is the real, then y is the imaginary. So imaginary is represented by that letter, which is I or j. So basically that is some brief introduction of complex numbers. Now as you see, complex numbers, it also has rules. So we have the addition rules, subtraction, multiplication, and division. So we are going to look at each. Now let's begin with addition and subtraction, because addition and subtraction are almost the same. So look at addition and subtraction. Now when you're adding or subtracting two complex numbers, for example, you have z1 is equal to x1 plus I y1, and z2 is equal to x2 plus I y2. Now when you're adding those two complex numbers, you add the real parts alone and the imaginary parts alone. So this is going to be, now when we add those two, we shall have our z1 plus z2 will give us x1 plus x2, because x1 and x2 they are the real parts, plus now our I y1 plus I y2. Now since I is common, this will give us x1 plus x2 and then plus I into y1 plus y2. Are you seeing that? So that is the that is how we do. So if it is subtraction, it is the same case. So for subtraction, it will be x1 minus x2, then plus, sorry, we are subtracting, so this one will be minus I y1, so minus, it will be minus y2, so it will be plus y2. So this is how we subtracted. So in fact here we shall have a positive, so here we shall have our positive to be positive. So this one won't be right, this one would be x1 minus x2. Then, so since we are subtracting I this minus this, so it will be, and here we have a plus, it will be plus I into y1 minus y2. So this is the subtraction case. Now those ones we shall look at examples. Now that is subtraction and addition. Then the most case and the most important one is addition, is multiplication and division. So how do you multiply complex numbers? So when we look at multiplication and division. Now multiplication, we are going to follow the same case as addition and subtraction. So for example, if you have z1 is equal to x1 plus I y1, and your z2 is equal to x2 plus I y2. So what we do, so we are finding z1 times z2. So this will be equal to x1 plus I y1 into x2 plus I y2. So we are multiplying. So when you are multiplying, you use the usual multiplication. So we shall have x1 into x2 plus I y2, then plus I y1 into x2 plus I y2. So this is how we are going to multiply. So we shall have this will give us what? x1, x2, then plus here we shall have our I will be maintained, x1 y2, then plus, so we are going here, it will be our I x2 y1, so then plus, now we are having I times I times, so our I times y2, then times y1. Now whenever you're in complex numbers, whenever you're multiplying two numbers, that is I, now what you must know is that I squared is equal to -1. So that means our I will be root of -1. So whenever you're finding a square root of a complex number, that means you're finding the square root of a negative number. So you get the square root of that value, then you assign it with the value I. So this one will be the square root of 1, but I, so which will be 1 times the square root of 1 is 1, so which will be 1 times I, which is I. So don't forget that. Now so here we are having I times I, which will be I squared, which is -1. So on coming here, we shall have our x1 x2 plus, now here I is common, shall have I into x1 y2 plus x2 y1. Then now since this one is mine, I squared is -1, so we shall have minus y2 y1. Now this part has become real, so we collect like terms, the real parts alone, then the imaginary parts alone. The imaginary parts, we say that the ones that have that I component on them. So this one would be x1 x2 minus y1 y2, then plus I into x1 y2 plus x2 y1. So this will be the simplified form. So that is how we deal with multiplication of those complex numbers. So what we are left with is division. Now when you look at the division of complex numbers, this is what we consider. So we have what we call, for example, if I'm to find z1 over z2, this is division, so it will be x1 plus I y1 over x2 plus I y2. Are you seeing that? Now what we do in this case, our major aim is to make the denominator, this one is to make the denominator to be real, So as you remember, in your sides, when you have a side in the denominator, you had to make it irrational by rationalizing the denominator using the conjugate, by multiplying the conjugate up and down. So this is the same thing here. Now we are making this one real, so we are realizing. So it is going to be, we multiply the denominator up and down, so we shall have x1 plus I y1 into x2 minus I y2 all over x2 plus I y2 into x2 minus I y2. You seeing that? So then we now here we bring in the idea of multiplication. So this will be x1 x2 then minus I x1 y2 then